Next on our agenda, a bucket list worthy cruise down the legendary Nile River. A journey so iconic it practically feels like you're stepping into an Agatha Christie novel. Thankfully, our trip was a lot more sunshine and sightseeing and a lot less murder mystery.
In terms of itineraries, most Nile cruises follow a pretty similar script, and that's not a bad thing. These cruises usually sail between Luxor and Aswan, or the other way around, ticking off some of Egypt's greatest highlights along the way. Think of it as a floating history class with better food and fewer pop quizzes. The typical itinerary is a greatest hits album of ancient Egypt. You've got Luxor Temple, Karnak Temple, the Mortuary Temple of Queen Hatshepsut, the Valley of the Kings, the Temple of Edfu, Kom Ombo, and finally Aswan's treasures, including the Philae Temple, the unfinished Obelisk, ancient Egypt's version of a work in progress, and the High Dam.
For a little extra thrill, you can spice up your Nile cruise with some optional activities. Because why just float down the river when you can float above it too? A hot air balloon ride over Luxor at sunrise is a must. Highly recommend. There's nothing like watching the temples wake up with the rising sun. In the evenings, you can catch a sound and light show at one of the temples, which is essentially a history class with dramatic lighting cast over the temples.
Most cruises run about 4 days, which is perfect if you're on a tight schedule. But if you want to go full Pharaoh, longer itineraries are available that venture off the beaten path to lesser known, but no less stunning temples like Dendera and Abydos.
Now, here's a pro tip from our own adventure. We started our trip by flying from Cairo to Abu Simbel, then made our way north to Aswan to begin the cruise. Why? Simple. Abu Simbel is incredible and crowded. By arriving early, before the caravan of buses shows up, we got to enjoy it in relative peace. Plus, by going against the cruise crowd and traveling from Aswan up to Luxor, we found many of the temples far less packed.
Our floating home for the trip was the MS Esplanade, a sleek, stylish riverboat that proved you can absolutely enjoy luxury while sailing past 3,000-year-old ruins. Here's a video of our accommodations on board. Hello, we are currently on the MS Esplanade. It is a Mayfair cruise line on the Nile cruise, and this is our cabin. First things first, we're going to start in the bathroom. As you can see, we actually have all the luxuries of a standard hotel bathroom, and it's actually quite spacious for what I would expect on a cruise ship. It has its very own stand-up shower with a tub. Again, a lot bigger than I expected, so this is fantastic. All right, we're gonna go ahead and check out the rest, and I'm gonna go ahead and say hi from here. So this is our main door. Come in, you have the bathroom immediately to your left. To the right, there's plenty of storage space. We have shelves here, we have the safe, we have our life jackets are in here as well. But if we're gonna come out here, you can see we have what constitutes a king bed. You can see it's the two beds together, works perfectly fine, plenty of space over here. We have all the amenities that we need. If I need a shoe kit or a vanity kit, all of that stuff is out here. We have our coffee because again, cranky without caffeine. Our water, which is complimentary. Down here, we also have extra storage space depending on how much stuff we bring with us, which we just got here. We'll get situated because it is a 3-night cruise. Back here is our vanity, desk, and everything that we need here. We have a beautiful sitting area with, it looks like some fruit that they provided for us. They also left a robe for each of us, and we have our slippers right down there, which are super important to me. But you're gonna see, this is not what we'll be looking at because again, we're on a cruise ship, but we do have a very big window. So as we are cruising along the Nile on our way from Aswan to Luxor, we can watch all of the beautiful desert pass. That's it from the MS Esplanade. For a daily itinerary, mornings usually began with an early breakfast and a temple visit, followed by lunch and some well-earned downtime back on the boat. This was prime time for a swim on the sun deck, a nap, or a massage, depending on how ambitious you're feeling.
Afternoons brought either another excursion or an optional activity, and evenings were capped with a dinner and some light entertainment. Think traditional music, dance performances, or a themed dinner night where you may or may not end up dancing in a galabeya.
While the itinerary is jam-packed with awe-inspiring stops, some of our favorite moments were the quiet ones, lounging on deck with a drink in hand, watching the Egyptian countryside drift by. There's something mesmerizing about seeing daily life unfold along the riverbanks. Farmers tending to their crops, children playing near the water, even the occasional water buffalo cooling off in the shade. It's a peaceful reminder that this river isn't just a relic of its past, it's still the heartbeat of Egypt today.
One final heads up. Every stop on your cruise will take you to some of Egypt's most iconic and jaw-dropping sites. However, much like how theme parks funnel you through a gift shop before you escape an attraction, many temple entrances and exits are lined with souvenir stalls. There you will find entrepreneurs who may encourage you to peruse their wares. If you're in a mood to shop, this is your chance to snag some memorable finds. But if your luggage is already bursting with papyrus and pyramid magnets, a simple la shukran, a polite no thank you in Arabic, will help you navigate the marketplace hustle with grace.
With the cruise overview behind us and your sun hat now firmly in place, it's time to kick things off with a whirlwind tour of Aswan's greatest hits. Before your riverboat sets sail, you'll explore a few iconic landmarks that set the stage for Egypt's ancient grandeur and its modern marvels.
First stop, the Aswan High Dam, because nothing says vacation like checking out a massive concrete wall holding back a biblical amount of water. Completed in the 1970s, this engineering feat was a game changer for Egypt, controlling the unpredictable flooding of the Nile and providing hydroelectric power to millions. It also created Lake Nasser, one of the largest man-made lakes in the world. While it may not have hieroglyphs or towering columns, it does come with a powerful view and an equally powerful breeze, if you're lucky.
Just nearby, you'll spot the Egypt-Russia Friendship Memorial, a dramatic concrete lotus-shaped tower that quietly says, "Thanks for the dam, comrades." Built to commemorate the Soviet-Egyptian partnership that helped construct the dam, the monument is part Cold War-era thank you card and part surrealist sculpture garden.
Then there's the unfinished obelisk, which might be the world's most famous oops. Carved directly out of bedrock, this massive monument was intended to be the largest obelisk ever erected. But somewhere along the way, probably after a few decades of chiseling, a crack appeared, and the entire project was abandoned. The ancient workers just left it there, tools metaphorically dropped, like they'd clocked out and never came back. Today, it's a fascinating peek into how these massive monuments were quarried and a relatable reminder that sometimes even the greatest ambitions can hit a snag. In Aswan, the final site you'll likely visit is the breathtaking Temple of Philae, beautifully set on its own island. To reach it, you'll board a small motorboat from the marina near the Aswan Dam, a scenic ride of about 10 to 15 minutes each way. Just be warned, it's so stunning that even the Nile itself refused to let her go. The temple isn't just a beautiful structure, it's a full-blown love letter to the goddess Isis, set on an island that feels like it drifted right out of an ancient legend. Originally located on Philae Island, the temple was nearly lost to rising waters caused by the construction of the Aswan High Dam.
But in an archaeological plot twist worthy of Hollywood, UNESCO stepped in during the 1960s and orchestrated one of the most ambitious temple relocations ever attempted. The entire complex was painstakingly dismantled and reassembled on higher ground on Ajilkia Island, stone by stone. Kind of like ancient Lego, if Lego sets weighed several tons and involved boats, cranes, and a lot of sweat.
Once you arrive, the magic begins the moment you lay your eyes on the first pylon. Towering and impressive, this monumental gateway is decorated with dramatic reliefs showing Ptolemaic pharaohs smiting enemies in the presence of Isis, Horus, and Hathor. Subtle? Not at all. Effective? Absolutely. It was meant to show that these rulers were powerful, pious, and not to be messed with. The pylon leads into a grand open courtyard, giving you your first real wow moment.
Nearby is the Arch of Hadrian, built during the Roman era when emperors were basically trying to photobomb Egyptian history. While Hadrian may not have been part of Egypt's original pantheon of gods, the Romans respected Egyptian religion enough to leave their architectural fingerprints on the temple. The arch is a lovely Roman touch, like a marble guestbook entry left by a polite conqueror.
As you continue exploring, you'll pass through the vestibule of Nectaneba, the first, one of the oldest parts of the complex. This colonnaded entryway sets the stage for everything that follows: elegant floral capitals, and that classic Egyptian symmetry that somehow makes everything feel eternal. Nectaneba the first was the last native Egyptian pharaoh to rule before a series of foreign dynasties took over. So you can say this vestibule marks a kind of last hurrah of purely Egyptian temple building.
At the heart of the complex is the sanctuary of the Temple of Isis, the most sacred space in the entire complex. Here, ancient priests would have carried out rituals, offerings, and perhaps whispered the kind of divine secrets that don't make it into travel blogs. This inner sanctuary once housed a cult statue of Isis, believed to hold her divine presence. Standing in this quiet, holy space, still dimly lit and atmospheric, you can almost imagine the flicker of oil lamps and the scent of the incense hanging in the air.
And don't miss the Kiosk of Trajan, a stunning open-air pavilion right on the water's edge. Often dubbed Pharaoh's Bed, though the origins of that name remain a bit of a mystery, perhaps ancient Egypt's answer to a luxury guest suite. This pavilion likely served a ceremonial role as the docking point for the sacred bark of Isis. This sacred bark was a richly adorned ritual vessel used to transport the statue of the goddess Isis during major processions and temple rites. It sailed between her main sanctuary on Philae and the island of Biga, believed to be the resting place of Osiris. With its graceful columns and unfinished carvings, it's one of the most photogenic spots in all of Egypt.
Visiting Philae isn't just a walk through history. It's a walk through centuries of devotion, power, politics, and storytelling. Whether you're a history buff, a mythology lover, or just here for the views, and let's be honest, they're spectacular, this island temple complex is a must-see. Sailing north from Aswan on our Nile River cruise, we pulled into a spot that felt like ancient Egypt's version of a shared Airbnb, Kom Ombo, the temple that dared to be different. While most temples play favorites and honor just one god, Kom Ombo said, why not both? And devoted itself to a divine roommate situation. Sobek, the crocodile-headed god of strength and fertility, and Hierorus, also known as Horus the Elder, the falcon-headed god of healing and protection.
And just like any house divided, Kom Ombo is split right down the middle. 2 entrances, 2 sanctuaries, 2 sets of halls. Basically, a divine duplex. If temples had family counseling, this one would be Exhibit A.
On one side, you have Sobek, who represented the more toothy side of the Nile. Ancient Egyptians both feared and revered crocodiles. On one hand, they were terrifying river monsters. On the other, Sobek was believed to offer protection, fertility, and strength. If you wanted a big family and fewer crocodile attacks, Sobek was your guy.
On the other side, Horus the Elder brought the vibes of order, clarity, and good health. A version of the god Horus, Hierorus symbolizes the triumph of good over evil and offered some balance to Sobek's chaos. So Kom Ombo basically served both Team Crocodile and Team Falcon, 2 very different fan bases under one roof.
As we wandered through the ruins, the symmetry was immediately obvious. Each side mirrored the other, with identical courts, columns, and sanctuaries. Basically, the ancient version of a his and hers temple layout. The walls were covered with intricate carvings, some of which show scenes of surgical tools and medical procedures. Yes, apparently ancient Egyptians documented their healthcare flexes right in their temples. Who knew pharaohs were into public health? Somewhere, an ancient HMO is nodding in approval. But the walls didn't stop at surgical scenes. One of the real gems is a beautifully preserved section of hieroglyphs depicting a calendar system. You'll spot little human figures representing days of the month and the 3 farming seasons: Akhet, which is flooding season, Peret, which is growing season, and Shimu, which is the harvest. It's like an ancient planner for agricultural productivity, complete with the visual equivalent of emojis. Instead of meeting at 3 or dentist at 6, these folks were tracking when the Nile would rise and when to plant their grain. Call it the original farmer's almanac with much better art direction.
There's also a Nileometer, a clever device used to measure the river's water levels and predict harvests or floods. It's basically ancient Egypt's version of a weather app, minus the push notifications and wildly inaccurate forecasts.
And then there's the back wall, which features a chilling depiction of Sobek looking downright smug, possibly thinking about his lunch, which may or may not have been tourists. The temple may be partly ruined, but the energy of the place is still intense. Like you're caught in a cosmic standoff between power and protection, tooth and talon, crocodile and falcon.
Just a few steps from the temple, we entered one of the strangest and most fascinating museums we've ever seen, the Crocodile Museum. Now, we've been to art museums, science museums, even chocolate museums, but nothing prepared us for a museum dedicated entirely to mummified crocodiles.
That's right. Dozens of ancient crocs, wrapped up like overachieving leftovers, line the glass cases. Some were tiny, others massive. Sobek would have been proud. There were also crocodile eggs, statues, and relics from rituals where these reptiles were treated more like sacred beings than bloodthirsty swimmers.
Apparently, crocodiles once swam freely in this area of the Nile, and priests raised them near the temple. They were pampered in life and mummified with great care in death. Frankly, these crocodiles got better funeral arrangements than most of us.
Kom Ombo is more than just a pit stop on the Nile. It's a temple that tells the story of duality, balance, and a society that could both revere chaos and order at once. Plus, where else can you see ancient surgical carvings and a crocodile mummy on the same day?
If you're sailing north from Aswan, don't miss it. It's half divine, half terrifying, and 100% unforgettable. Just maybe keep your hands out of the water. Sobek might still be watching.
Traveling north on the Nile from Kom Ombo, we found ourselves gliding into one of Egypt's best preserved time capsules, the Temple of Edfu. The moment you step off the cruise ship, you'll see a whole row of horse-drawn carriages lined up like they've been waiting just for you. Drivers calling out, horses flicking their ears, and the whole scene just buzzing with old world charm. We picked our carriage and set off, the clip-clop of hooves echoing through the streets as we rolled past cafes, shopkeepers arranging their displays, and kids waving like we were minor celebrities.
By the time we reached the temple's towering pylons, it felt like we traveled not just across town, but across centuries. Unlike many of the weathered and half-collapsed ruins dotting the Nile's banks, Edfu feels like it hit the pause button sometime in antiquity, and just waited patiently for visitors with sunscreen and digital cameras to show up. Now here's a pro tip. After you've arrived, snap a quick photo of your carriage number or the horse stall before you make your way into the temple. It makes finding a ride back to the ship a breeze. Dedicated to Horus, the falcon-headed god of kingship and the sky, the temple isn't just massive, it's majestic. Horus isn't one to go small. If there were ever a divine real estate show, this would be his winning submission. Grand pylons, soaring columns, dramatic courtyards, and more religious symbolism than a theology major's dream journal.
At the heart of Edfu's mythology is the ultimate family feud, Horus versus Set. Set, the god of chaos, did the unthinkable, murdered his own brother Osiris, Horus's father. So naturally, Horus sought justice and a little revenge. What you'll find carved along the temple walls are detailed reliefs of this cosmic cage match. There are scenes of Horus tracking Set down, delivering divine justice, and triumphantly reclaiming order from chaos.
Some of these carvings are pure drama. Think of it as ancient Egypt's version of a Marvel blockbuster, but with more feathers and fewer CGI explosions. There's even a script of sorts. Inscriptions that outline the sacred reenactments the priests would perform annually to retell this epic showdown. Move over, Shakespeare. Horus had the original revenge plot.
One of the fascinating aspects of Edfu is that it includes detailed inscriptions explaining how the temple was built. Dates, rituals, architectural intentions, like ancient Egyptian footnotes, if you will. Among these, there are references to the island of creation, the mythical place where life first began in Egyptian cosmology. The temple wasn't just sacred because it was pretty, it was meant to mirror the moment creation itself unfolded, with the sanctuary acting as a kind of cosmic GPS marker for where it all began.
And if you're someone who's ever walked the wrong way on an escalator, no judgment, you'll appreciate this. Even the staircases at Edfu come with instructions. There are 2 stairways, one for ascending and one for descending, and the walls are carved with figures walking in the correct direction to make it obvious which is which. Because when you're carrying a sacred statue or a ritual offering, the last thing you want is a spiritual traffic jam. Ancient Egyptians, masters of urban planning and ceremonial crowd control.
The temple was constructed during the Ptolemaic period, when Egypt was ruled by a line of Greek-speaking pharaohs after the death of Alexander the Great. So while the architecture is quintessentially Egyptian, there's a Hellenistic twist underneath, like finding out your pharaoh can read Plato and design hieroglyphs.
Unfortunately, like many pagan temples, Edfu eventually fell into disuse after Theodosius I issued an edict in the 4th century AD banning non-Christian worship. The temple was abandoned, filled with sand and silt, and buried up to its roof for centuries. On the plus side, this is also why it's so well preserved. Thank you, desert neglect.
One of the most impressive parts of the temple is the inner sanctuary, where the sacred boat still stands on display. This wasn't just ornamental. This boat once carried the image of Horus during religious festivals, paraded around with fanfare, music, and probably a priest or two who took their job way too seriously.
The sanctuary itself is a symbolic recreation of the primeval mound from which life emerged. Imagine walking into a room designed to feel like a moment the universe took its first breath. Now that's interior design with ambition.
The reliefs throughout the temple are a visual feast. You'll see Horus smiting enemies, his favorite hobby, pharaohs making offerings, scenes of purification, and Horus hanging out with Hathor, his divine consort, whose own temple sits far away in Dendera, but makes a guest appearance here. It's like a divine crossover episode.
And of course, Horus is everywhere. Falcons with crowns, falcons with scepters, falcons on boats. If you didn't know any better, you'd think you'd stumbled into a secret shrine for bird watchers.
Edfu is more than just stone and stories. It's a temple that survived time, theology, and a whole lot of sand. As you stand beneath the towering pylons and gaze at the falcon god staring back at you, you can't help but feel the weight of a civilization that saw the universe as ordered, sacred, and a little theatrical.
If you're watching this video, chances are you're not the type to cruise the Nile and skip the temples. But if you're going to skip one, don't make it Edfu. This temple's got it all. Mythic showdowns, rich symbolism, a splash of Hellenistic flair, sacred staircases with built-in traffic instructions, and one seriously majestic falcon god who knew how to make an entrance. From Edfu, the cruise will take us north to our final location, Luxor. Touring this area is typically done in 2 days. The first day involves exploring the West Bank. If you booked an optional hot air balloon ride, this would be the date for the sunrise excursion. Afterwards, you would visit the Valley of the Kings, and in the afternoon, the Mortuary Temple of Queen Hatshepsut. On the second and final day, you would tour the East Bank, which includes Luxor Temple and Karnak Temple.
If you've ever wondered what it would be like to float above 4,000 years of history before breakfast, let me introduce you to the magic of a hot air balloon ride over Luxor. Spoiler alert! It's every bit as epic as it sounds. And yes, it does require you to wake up at an hour usually reserved for sweet dreams.
The day starts off in the dark, and I don't mean the sun hasn't risen yet kind of dark. I mean, why is the moon still fully clocked in kind of dark? We were picked up from the cruise ship and shuttled to the launch site on the west bank of the Nile, where dozens of sleepy-eyed adventurers gathered like moths to the flame, or in this case, the giant propane burners that would soon fill our balloon.
Speaking of those burners, when they fire up, you feel it. That sudden blast of heat on your face is like being hugged by a small, invisible dragon. It's surprisingly comforting, especially in the early morning chill. The balloon slowly inflated, the basket wobbled upright, and before we could second guess this whole let's go airborne in a wicker basket decision, we were off.
As we rose into the sky, the Nile River shimmered below us, winding like a timeless ribbon through the landscape. On one side, the lush green farmland stretched out like a well-tended quilt. On the other, the desert yawned wide and golden. It's not just pretty, there's deep symbolism here too. In ancient Egyptian belief, the east side of the Nile, where the sun rises, was the land of the living. The west side, where the sun sets, was the land of the dead. So yes, even geography had a spiritual job description.
Watching the sun slowly rise over the Nile from a balloon was surreal. The light crept in gently at first, and then, with that classic Egyptian flair for drama, spilled gold across the river and lit up the entire valley like some divine spotlight.
From above, Luxor is a patchwork of green fields, sleepy villages, golden desert, and some of the world's most iconic ruins. We floated peacefully past the Colossi of Memnon, which looked much smaller from the air, but still impressively stoic, as if they'd been waiting for someone to look down on them for once.
In the distance, we could clearly see the Mortuary Temple of Queen Hatshepsut, carved right into the cliffs like an ancient architectural mic drop. Seeing it from above, with the desert stretching endlessly behind it, was a reminder of just how commanding Hatshepsut's presence must have been. You don't build something like that unless you really want people to know you mean business.
The balloon drifted silently over local villages, where early risers were already out tending fields, herding animals, or pausing to wave at us like we were part of the morning's entertainment. And honestly, maybe we were. A sky full of colorful hot air balloons floating overhead isn't exactly your average sunrise. If I were down there, I'd stop and stare too. If you find yourself in Luxor and you're even considering a hot air balloon ride, do it. Yes, it's an early wake up. Yes, you wonder how a basket and some fire managed to defy gravity. But once you're in the air, looking down on temples, tombs, and the eternal Nile, you'll realize this isn't just a ride. It's a floating history lesson wrapped in silence and sunrise. And if Queen Hatshepsut could see you now, she'd probably give you an approving nod.
After floating high above the Nile in a hot air balloon, watching the sunrise over the west bank of Luxor, we made our way back to Earth, literally and spiritually, with a visit to one of Egypt's most iconic and mysterious places, the Valley of the Kings.
This ancient necropolis might not have the towering glamour of the Giza pyramids, but don't let the lack of pointy architecture fool you. What lies beneath the surface here is where the real treasure and drama begins.
The valley is surrounded by rugged cliffs and hills, and at the heart of it all is a distinctly pyramid-shaped peak, almost as if Mother Nature herself decided to honor the pharaohs with a geological monument. It's not hard to imagine that ancient architects looked up, saw that natural pyramid, and said, "Why build another one when we've already got this beauty?"
But there were practical reasons too. The old school pyramids of the Old Kingdom, like those at Giza, were a little too flashy. You'd think being buried under a few million tons of limestone would be enough to deter grave robbers, but nope. Those pyramids may as well have had a flashing neon sign saying, "Pharaoh buried here with loads of treasure."
So the new kingdom rulers went for stealth mode. Hidden tombs dug deep into the desert hills far from the Nile and hopefully from the hands of tomb raiders. Spoiler alert, some raiders still found their way in, but the strategy did have its wins. We're looking at you, Tutankhamun, the boy king whose modest tomb somehow survived mostly intact.
To date, over 60 tombs have been discovered in the valley, although only around 10 to 15 are open to the public at any given time, depending on preservation efforts and ongoing excavations. Getting around is easy. You can hop aboard a tram that shuttles visitors from the main gate to the base of the valley, highly recommended when the sun starts flexing. Or you can walk the dusty paths if you're feeling adventurous and well hydrated.
Once inside, each tomb is unique, ranging from simple chambers to elaborate color-splashed corridors that stretch deep into the earth. We visited several of the All-Stars, and let's just say, if these tombs were hotel suites, they'd be presidential penthouses with serious afterlife upgrades.
Discovered in 1922 by British archaeologist Howard Carter, Tutankhamun's tomb, KV62, is the Valley of the King's most famous resident. Not because of the architectural grandeur, but because it was miraculously founded mostly intact. In a valley looted for centuries, this modest tomb became the archaeological equivalent of winning the lottery.
Tutankhamun, often nicknamed the Boy King, ascended the throne at around age 9 and died suddenly at about 18. His brief and relatively uneventful reign came at the tail end of a turbulent period marked by his predecessor, Akhenaten's radical religious reforms. Much of Tut's reign was spent restoring Egypt's traditional gods and temples, trying to undo the chaos left behind. Because of his early death, the tomb appears to have been hastily repurposed, possibly not even intended for him originally.
Despite its compact layout, the tomb was crammed with over 5,000 artifacts: golden chariots, jewelry, board games, statues, thrones, and of course that now iconic gold funerary mask. The discovery electrified the world and sparked a wave of Tut mania that continues to this day. Most of the treasures once displayed at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo have since moved to their new home at the Grand Egyptian Museum in Giza.
The tomb consists of just 4 main chambers. Visitors first enter the antechamber, which was packed wall to wall with household goods, chariots, and furniture, almost like a royal garage sale. Beyond it lay the burial chamber, where a massive gilded wooden shrine housed a series of nested coffins, with Tut's mummified body tucked inside the innermost one made of solid gold. To the right of the antechamber was the treasury, home to many of the tomb's most valuable items, including a life-size guardian statue and the famous canopic shrine that protected his embalmed organs. A fourth room, the annex, held more everyday items, but was so cluttered that Carter famously called it a tip, which is British slang for a messy room.
The tomb itself is small, and its walls are sparsely decorated, primarily with scenes depicting Tut's funeral and his journey into the afterlife. But what it lacks in artistic flourish, it more than makes up for it in historical importance. It's a powerful reminder that legacy isn't always about size or splendor. Sometimes it's about timing, preservation, and just the right touch of mystery.
If Tut's tomb is the compact fan favorite, Seti I's tomb, KV17, is the full-blown Broadway production. This tomb is one of the longest and most beautifully decorated in the valley. Seti I, father of Ramses II, clearly spared no expense on his ticket to the afterlife.
And he earned it. Seti I was one of ancient Egypt's great military pharaohs, known for stabilizing the empire after a chaotic period and launching successful campaigns into Syria and Libya. He also kept the building boom going strong, commissioning impressive temples, including the Temple of Seti I at Abydos, which houses one of the most famous kings list in Egyptology.
Inside his tomb, the artwork is astonishing. Entire walls covered with intricate texts and vibrant images from the Book of the Dead and other sacred texts. It's a visual guidebook to help the pharaoh navigate the afterlife, complete with spells, passwords, and other mystical FAQs. It's also one of the earliest examples of a royal tomb with such elaborate text carved so deeply and precisely. It's like the deluxe edition of a cosmic travel manual, with every chapter illuminated.
Known for holding Egypt together during a time of serious chaos, Ramses III was a warrior pharaoh who dealt with invasions, conspiracies, and one of the earliest recorded labor strikes. No, really. His tomb, KV11, is grand, colorful, and filled with vivid depictions from the Book of Gates and other underworld-themed epics.
The Book of Gates isn't your typical bedtime story. It's more like an ancient Egyptian escape room meets cosmic obstacle course.
It describes the soul's journey through 12 gates, or hours of the night, where it must pass through guarded portals, encounter gods, and face judgment before reaching the final sunrise and eternal rebirth. Each gate comes with its own set of guardians, passwords, and symbolic challenges, sort of like divine TSA checkpoints.
The corridor alone is worth the visit. Bold, dramatic, and practically screaming, "I ruled like a boss!" Ramses III may have had a turbulent reign, but judging by this tomb, he wasn't about to go quietly into the afterlife.
Originally started by Ramses V, this tomb was taken over and dramatically expanded by his successor, Ramses VI. Because, hey, prime afterlife real estate in the Valley of the Kings doesn't come cheap. Ramses VI, a grandson of Ramses the Great, reigned during the time of declining power and economic strain, but you wouldn't know that by looking at the tomb.
KV9 is best known for its spectacular ceiling artwork, especially the breathtaking cosmic scene of the sky goddess Nut, arched protectively over the heavens in star-studded form. It's a celestial masterpiece that turns the burial chamber into an ancient Egyptian planetarium.
The walls are covered with deeply carved and vibrantly painted scenes from the Book of Gates, Book of Caverns, and the Book of Day and Night, all detailing the sun god Ra's nightly journey through the underworld. It's a dramatic mythological travelogue, complete with gods, demons, and a sunrise finale. If you're into ancient astronomy and epic underworld sagas, this tomb is a showstopper.
Ramses IV came to the throne during a politically rocky time as the son of Ramses III, whose assassination plot he narrowly escaped. His reign lasted only about 6 years, but he didn't waste time when it came to building a worthy tomb. KV2 is well preserved, spacious, and one of the more accessible tombs in the valley.
What sets KV2 apart is the variety of text decorating its walls. Book of the Dead, Book of Caverns, Book of Gates, and Litany of Ra, as if Ramses IV was hedging his bets on every possible route through the afterlife. The artwork is crisp, colorful, and surprisingly well lit, making this a favorite among casual visitors and photography enthusiasts alike.
Bonus! You can usually explore it without a guide breathing down your neck or a crowd shuffling behind you. It's one of the rare tombs where you can slow down, take it all in, and feel like you have the afterlife to yourself.
Being the 13th son of Ramses II probably meant that Merenptah didn't expect to rule, but he eventually inherited the throne at an advanced age and reigned for about a decade. He faced invasions from Libyans and sea peoples and worked hard to maintain Egypt's fading glory during a time of instability.
His tomb, KV8, is long and deep, nearly rivaling his father's in scale, but slightly more understated in decoration. The corridor descends steeply, with multiple chambers adorned with scenes from the Book of the Dead, Amduat, and Book of Gates, guiding Merenptah's soul through the treacherous night hours of the underworld.
The burial chamber is especially impressive with its massive granite sarcophagus and dramatic wall reliefs depicting gods, serpents, and judgment scenes. If Ramses II's monuments were blockbuster epics, Merenptah's tomb is a solid sequel with quieter gravitas. Less flash, but still packed with spiritual punch.
At the time of our visit, KV7, the tombs of Ramses II, was closed to the public due to ongoing excavation and restoration work. Considering Ramses II was one of the most powerful and prolific pharaohs in Egyptian history, it would have been fascinating to see how his final resting place measured up to the grandeur of his reign. The Valley of the Kings is more than just a collection of tombs. It's an ancient expression of hope, legacy, and extremely detailed burial planning. The walls are painted with stories, spells, and star maps, all designed to guide the deceased through the trials of the afterlife. It's like an eternal orientation packet, complete with stunning visuals.
It's humbling to walk through the same corridors once meant for royalty, their priests, and maybe a few ambitious tomb raiders. And after seeing it all from above that morning in a hot air balloon, then descending into the hills where these pharaohs now rest, you realize Egypt isn't just history. It's a layered, living story you can walk into, preferably before it gets too hot. Bring water, bring curiosity, and maybe bring a spell or two from the Book of the Dead, just in case. If you have a bit more time in the area, a side trip to the nearby Valley of the Queens is also highly recommended, especially for the opportunity to see the breathtaking tomb of Queen Nefertari, the beloved wife of Ramses II. Her tomb is considered one of the most exquisite ever discovered in Egypt, with vivid, well-preserved wall paintings that practically glow with color. It would have been an incredible experience to compare how pharaohs and queens were honored in death, one in bold hieroglyphic epics, the other in delicate artistry worthy of royalty.
After lunch, and still buzzing from our morning exploration of the Valley of the Kings, and maybe the caffeine kicking in, we made our way to one of the most stunning architectural feats in all of ancient Egypt, the Mortuary Temple of Queen Hatshepsut. And let me just say, this place isn't just a temple, it's a mic drop carved in stone.
Before diving into the temple itself, let's talk about the remarkable woman behind it. Hatshepsut wasn't your typical pharaoh, mainly because she wasn't a man. Rising to power around 1479 BC, she initially served as regent for her young stepson, Thutmose III. But then, she just kind of stayed in charge for over 2 decades. Bold move. She declared herself pharaoh, adopted the full regalia, even the traditional pharaonic beard, more on that later, and ruled with undeniable skill.
Under her reign, Egypt experienced peace, prosperity, and ambitious architectural and trade expansions, including her famed expedition to the mysterious land of Punt, which is depicted at the temple in delightful detail. Scholars still argue over where Punt was. Some say modern-day Somalia, and others point to Eritrea.
Set dramatically against the towering cliffs of Deir el-Bahari, Hatshepsut's temple wasn't just a grand statement. It was designed to blend in with the cliffs of the Theban peak rising behind it. That's no accident. Her architect, Senamut, who some say was more than just her architect, wink wink, built it right at the head of the valley in perfect harmony with its surroundings. Nature and monument meet here with a jaw-dropping elegance.
3 terraced levels connected by long ramps create a kind of stone wedding cake, and it's hard to decide which layer is your favorite. The architecture is symmetrical, monumental, and almost minimalist in its clean lines, especially compared to the chaos of later temples.
Oh, and don't miss the colonnades, where columns with capitals shaped like cow-eared goddess Hathor offered an added divine flourish. Hatshepsut knew how to appeal to the gods and the aesthetic crowd.
Halfway up the temple, you'll encounter reliefs of the second terrace dedicated to Hatshepsut's divine birth. In this ancient origin story, the god Amun himself fathers her, giving her not just royal legitimacy, but literal divine authority. This wasn't just a mural, it was political branding 101. After all, if the gods signed off on your rule, who was going to argue?
Spoiler alert! Her stepson, Thutmose III. Once Thutmose III finally got control after Hatshepsut's death, he went full ancient censorship mode. Her images were chiseled out, her cartouches erased, and statues defaced. Not because she ruled poorly, but likely because her unprecedented success as a female pharaoh didn't quite align with the patriarchal narrative he wanted to restore.
Ironically, his efforts to erase her only made her story more fascinating to modern scholars. You just know someone was important when there's that much effort to pretend that they didn't even exist. Now let's take a look at a few more standout features of the temple that we haven't covered yet. First up is the festival or upper courtyard, a space that earns its name because its walls function like a carved storyboard for the beautiful Feast of the Valley, one of the most important celebrations in ancient Thebes. During this annual festival, the living cross to the west bank to honor the dead with offerings, music, and vibrant boat processions. In spirit, it was a bit like a Day of the Dead style celebration. joyful, communal, and centered on keeping bonds with loved ones alive. Next is the expedition to Punt. Lively carvings show exotic animals, incense trees, and the trading of gold and myrrh. One scene famously includes the Queen of Punt, portrayed with a, let's say, generous body shape, which has kept art historians busy ever since.
Finally, statues with beards. Yep, Hatshepsut often had herself sculpted with the ceremonial false beard of pharaohs. It wasn't a fashion choice. It was about projecting traditional authority. If wearing a beard got the job done, Hatshepsut was more than game.
Visiting the Mortuary Temple of Hatshepsut isn't just a lesson in ancient architecture or dynastic drama, it's a reminder that history is often shaped by those bold enough to break the mold. Her temple is not only attributed to a powerful and visionary ruler, but a masterpiece of design that still stuns visitors thousands of years later.
After an already full day exploring, we made one final stop before calling it a day. The Colossi of Memnon. And let's just say, it was a larger-than-life ending, quite literally.
Standing at a towering 60 feet, about 18 meters tall, these twin stone giants have been patiently watching over the Theban necropolis for more than 3,000 years. Each colossus once guarded the entrance to the grand mortuary temple of Pharaoh Amenhotep III, which has mostly vanished over the centuries thanks to floods, looting, and some less than gentle ancient remodeling. But somehow these two statues survived the chaos, worn, cracked, and weathered, yet still radiating authority. Think of them as ancient Egypt's version of grizzled action heroes who'd seen it all.
Amenhotep III, their original owner, was no minor pharaoh. He reigned during the golden age of the 18th dynasty, a time of immense wealth, international diplomacy, and artistic achievement. These statues were just appetizers. His full mortuary temple was once the largest and most opulent ever built in Egypt. Unfortunately, time and nature weren't kind, but the statues remain, seated on their thrones, hands resting on knees, staring eternally eastward toward the rising sun, because even in death, Amenhotep wasn't one to miss a good sunrise. If you look closely, you'll notice carved reliefs at the base of the statues. Among them are figures of Amenhotep's mother, Mutimwaya, and his chief queen, Tiye, both key women in his powerful royal court. These weren't decorative additions, they were deliberate displays of lineage, influence, and divine support. In ancient Egypt, family ties were everything, even more so when your family had a direct line to the gods.
Now here's where things get a little weird and legendary. After an earthquake in 27 BCE cracked one of the statues, it reportedly began to sing at dawn. A mysterious moaning or whistling sound would echo from the stone as it warmed with the morning sun. Naturally, the Greeks jumped on this and declared it a miracle. They believed the statue was Memnon, the Ethiopian warrior king and son of Eos, the goddess of dawn. According to myth, Eos would weep for her fallen son each morning, and the sound was Memnon greeting her from the afterlife. Grief, but make it acoustical.
This miracle turned the site into an ancient tourist hotspot. Roman emperors, poets, and travelers flocked here hoping to hear the magical song. One emperor in particular, Septimius Severus, decided to fix the statue in the 3rd century CE. Big mistake. The repairs silenced the statue forever. So yes, the first recorded case of if it ain't broke, don't fix it happened in ancient Egypt.
As we stood before the Colossi, bathed in the golden light of late afternoon, it was hard not to be impressed. Despite the wear and tear, these statues still exude dignity. They're monuments to a time when pharaohs were gods, temples stretched for acres, and stone could hum a tune.
And with that, our day on the west bank of Luxor came to an epic, mythical, mildly melancholic close. Giant statues, divine mothers, ghostly songs, and all. Not a bad way to spend the day. Next time, though, maybe we'll try whispering to the statues to see if they whisper back. You never know.
Our final day on the Nile cruise was a grand finale in every sense. After days of temples, tombs, and tahini, we wrapped things up with two of the most iconic ancient sites in Egypt, Karnak and Luxor temples. It was the kind of day where every direction you turned, you felt like you were walking through the pages of a history textbook.
We started the morning at Karnak Temple, which isn't so much a temple as it is an entire neighborhood of sacred spaces. Spanning over 100 hectares, Karnak is one of the largest religious complexes ever constructed, and it evolved over more than 2,000 years. The temple has three main precincts. The central one dedicated to Amun-Ra, king of the gods who was formed by the fusion of the gods Amun and Ra. A southern one to Mut, Amun's wife, and a northern one to Montu, a falcon-headed war god who clearly skipped leg day because his precinct is the smallest.
In the central precinct, we entered the famed hypostyle hall, where 134 gigantic columns tower overhead like a petrified forest. 12 of these columns feature open papyrus capitals, symbolizing Upper Egypt in full bloom, while the remaining 122 have closed buds. Let me tell you, standing among them makes you feel like an ant that wandered into an ancient botanical garden.
One of the highlights was the Temple of Ramses III, which features 20 Osiris statues. These statues represent the god Osiris, the god of the afterlife, resurrection, and all things spooky, yet regal. And they show Ramses III in classic mummified chic mode. We also passed by the festival hall of Thutmose III, a sort of ancient conference center where the pharaoh could host royal events and display his military victories. Thutmose III also built a pair of obelisks here. One now resides in Istanbul, while its twin was tragically lost to history. While exploring the site, you might hear tour guides mention that Alexander the Great commissioned this shrine. In reality, the famous pink granite sanctuary at the heart of Karnak is frequently misattributed to him. While Alexander did order a sweeping restoration of decaying New Kingdom sanctuaries across Thebes, he died suddenly in 323 BC, long before physical construction could even begin. The granite pavilion we see today was ultimately commissioned, built, and inscribed under his half-brother and successor, Philip Aridaeus. Unfortunately, history mostly remembers him as the guy who inherited an empire and then sort of did nothing with it. Still, credit where credit's due. He at least helped keep the monuments going while everyone else was busy carving up Alexander's legacy.
This shrine was dedicated to the sacred bark of Ammon. This wasn't just any boat. It was a lavish, miniature, shrine-like vessel, often gilded in gold and inlaid with precious stones, used to carry the statue of Amun-Re during major religious festivals like Opet and the Valley Festival. Priests would shoulder the bark on poles and parade it through grand processions, symbolizing the god's divine presence and cosmic authority.
Other architectural gems include the sacred lake, once used for priestly purification rituals, and the shrine of Seti II. Together, they show just how much this complex evolved as one pharaoh after another added their personal flair, turning Karnak into ancient Egypt's ultimate version of home improvement. Everywhere you look, history is layered. You have the ram-headed Sphinxes guarding the first court, the soaring 71-foot obelisk of Thutmose I, and the massive 97-foot obelisk of Queen Hatshepsut, which stands as the tallest surviving obelisk in Egypt. Then there are the statues with a twist. The Colossus of Ramses II in the forecourt was later rebranded when a high priest of Amun inscribed his own cartouche onto the base. We see a similar game of royal musical chairs at the seventh pylon. On the right sits a beautifully preserved red granite Colossus of Thutmose III, while on the left stands its weathered twin. Originally carved by Thutmose III as well, but later usurped by Ramses II, who carved his own cartouches into the throne to claim the likeness as his own.
After absorbing enough history to qualify for a minor in Egyptology, we headed back to the boat for lunch.
After some lunch and a bit of a siesta, we strolled down the recently restored Avenue of the Sphinxes, a 2.7-kilometer ceremonial road that connected Karnak and Luxor temples. Flanked by over 1,000 Sphinx statues, this pathway was the main route for the Opet Festival, a grand procession that transported statues of the Theban triad, Amun, Mut, and their son Khonsu, between the two temples.
The Sphinxes themselves are not just for show. They symbolize protection and divine guardianship. Some have ram heads, symbolizing Amun, while others sport human heads. If you squint, they almost look like ancient traffic cones ushering in divinity.
Luxor Temple is a masterpiece dedicated to the rejuvenation of kingship, an ancient power charging station for pharaohs. While Karnak focused on the sprawling divine pantheon, Luxor was more personal. It was here that the pharaoh's divine right to rule was ceremonially renewed, particularly during the Opet festival, when the god Amun-Ra symbolically merged with the reigning king, essentially giving him a spiritual thumbs up to continue ruling Egypt.
The temple is primarily devoted to the Theban triad, Amun, king of the gods, his consort, Mut, and their son Khonsu, the moon god. This divine family forms the theological backbone of the temple. Their presence echoed in statues, sanctuaries, and reliefs throughout the complex, kind of like an ancient version of a royal family endorsement deal.
The entrance to Luxor Temple is nothing short of cinematic. The first pylon, built by Ramses II, stretches nearly 58 yards wide and would have loomed even larger in antiquity, flanked by symbols of divine power and royal might. Its outer face is carved with dramatic scenes from the Battle of Kadesh, a campaign Ramses may or may not have won, but definitely made sure he looked victorious in. Charging ahead in his chariot, bow drawn, while his enemies scatter like startled cats.
At the pylon's base once stood 6 colossal statues of Ramses II, 2 seated and 4 standing, designed to project sheer awe and royal authority. Besides the king, his beloved queen Nefertari is depicted as Hathor, the goddess of love and motherhood, a rare honor that speaks to her unique role both in the king's life and Egypt's religious iconography.
2 towering pink granite obelisks once completed the dramatic entryway. Today, only one remains. Its twin now resides at the Place de la Concorde in Paris, thanks to a 19th century diplomatic gift that left Luxor with a bit of an architectural imbalance. These obelisks once pointed heavenward, symbolizing the pharaoh's connection to the divine.
Beyond the pylon lines the peristyle court of Ramses II, a vast open courtyard framed by a double row of columns shaped like a closed papyrus stalks. Peristyle simply means a courtyard surrounded by columns, and this one served as a grand stage for religious ceremonies and public processions. The papyrus design symbolized life and creation, and reinforced Ramses' divine status as if to say, yes, I'm literally holding up the order of the universe.
Reliefs on the surrounding walls vividly depict the Opet festival, during which sacred barks of Amun, Mut, and Khonsu were carried in a ceremonial procession from Karnak to Luxor. It was more than just a parade. It was a public renewal of the king's divine mandate, complete with music, incense, and the ancient equivalent of royal PR.
On one side of the court rises the mosque of Abu al-Hagag, still in use today and perched atop the ruins of a Christian church, built over an earlier temple. It's a literal stack of sacred traditions, where Egyptian, Greco-Roman, Christian, and Islamic heritage coexist in layers. It's like a spiritual lasagna baked over 3,000 years.
Tucked behind the court is a lesser-known gem, a triple sanctuary built by Queen Hatshepsut for the sacred barks of the Theban triad. These shrines house the portable boats used in religious festivals. Hatshepsut, Egypt's most powerful female pharaoh, made sure her legacy was etched in stone, only to have her name later chiseled over by her successor, Thutmose III, in what was basically the ancient world's version of hitting the undo button on someone else's achievements.
Moving deeper into the temple, we arrived at the colonnade of Amenhotep III, a grand processional hall flanked by 14 monumental columns, each over 50 feet tall and topped with open papyrus capitals. The symbolism is unmistakable. Papyrus, representing Lower Egypt, pairs with the lotus motifs, Upper Egypt, to convey unity, creation, and divine balance. These columns aren't just structural, they're metaphysical cheerleaders for cosmic order.
The colonnade walls continue the story of the Opet festival, showing Amun-Ra's journey to Luxor and his ritual union with the pharaoh. The reliefs are both sacred spectacle and stone-scripted state propaganda, reminding everyone that the king didn't just want to rule, he was cosmically obligated to.
Next came the solar court of Amenhotep III, an open-air space used for sun worship and likely other state rituals. Its surrounding columns mirror the papyrus design, reinforcing themes of rebirth and cosmic harmony. From there, we entered the hypostyle hall, a roof chamber supported by closely packed columns that once held up a ceiling symbolizing the heavens. Walking through it feels like wandering into a stone forest built by divine architects, with a really impressive sense of symmetry.
Before you reach the end of the hypostyle hall, just before the final pair of columns, take a look to your left. There you'll spot a modest altar dedicated to Constantine the Great, the first Roman emperor to convert to Christianity. It's easy to miss, but its presence speaks volumes. Even in a temple built for ancient Egyptian gods, history didn't just stop. It kept rewriting itself. Think of it as the temple quietly saying, "New management, same great location."
Speaking of dramatic renovations, the next space beyond the hypostyle hall is what's known as the Roman Sanctuary, and yes, the name is a bit of a giveaway. As you enter, you'll face that subtle recess framed by elegant Corinthian granite columns, giving it a distinct, classic Roman look.
Originally, this grand Egyptian antechamber had 8 columns, but around 300 AD, Roman occupiers completely ripped them out to transform the space into an imperial cult chapel dedicated to their divine emperors. They even plastered over the original pharaonic reliefs to paint vibrant Roman frescoes. Talk about an aggressive redesign, ancient Egyptian edition. Unfortunately, most of these frescoes have been destroyed.
But history wasn't done with this room. Centuries later, during the Byzantine period, the space was renovated yet again. Following Constantine's shift toward Christianity, local Christians converted this pagan Roman sanctuary into a Christian church. They added Christian imagery over the older walls, making this single room a chaotic historical nesting doll. Like much of the temple, it's a total mashup. Part pharaonic grandeur, part Roman imperial design, and part early Christian sanctuary, all sharing the same square footage.
But here's the twist. The Romans weren't the pioneers of this architectural takeover. They were actually following a blueprint laid down centuries earlier by the ultimate trendsetter. We shall talk about him shortly.
Moving forward through the recess, you enter the offering chapel, also known as the second antechamber. It earned that name because it sits just before the inner sanctuary of the sacred barks, basically the temple's version of a backstage prep area for the gods. This is where priests carried out daily rituals presenting food, drink, incense, and other offerings to keep the divine well taken care of. Think of it as room service, but for the deities.
Continuing on, the next chamber follows a similar layout, until the story takes an unexpected turn. Long before the Romans set foot in Egypt, Alexander the Great had already looked at the sacred space and decided to make it his own. In fact, one might argue the Romans were simply copying his homework. Just like the Romans later did with their 8 columns, Alexander walked into this room, decided he was unimpressed with the original layout, and ripped out 4 of the original Egyptian columns to insert his own standalone bark chapel directly into the space. Subtle? Not at all. Strategic? Completely.
By turning this chamber into the resting place for the sacred bark of Amun-Ra during the Opet festival, Alexander didn't just renovate the architecture, he elevated himself to a starring role in Luxor Temple's most important ritual.
This wasn't just any room. This zone functioned as the spiritual climax of the entire temple, a space so sacred that only priests and the pharaoh can enter. It was the divine VIP lounge where Amun-Ra was believed to meet the king to reaffirm his status as God on earth. By dropping his chapel into this exact spot, Alexander wasn't merely participating in Egyptian tradition, he was placing himself at the very heart of divine kingship.
Despite its modest size, the Alexander the Great Chapel delivers a masterclass in ancient PR. Built soon after his conquest of Egypt in 332 BC, it presents Alexander not as a foreign Macedonian invader, but as a fully legitimate Egyptian pharaoh.
Before you move on, take a close look at the reliefs on the chapel walls. You'll see Alexander rendered entirely in classic Egyptian style, wearing traditional crowns and performing offerings to Amun-Ra. Walk in without context and you'd never guess he was Greek, which was exactly the point. He understood that winning Egypt meant embracing its past, not overwriting it.
However, if you look closely at the craftsmanship, you can catch the ancient art departments clashing.
While the style is purely Egyptian, the execution tells a different story. The classic Egyptian reliefs from earlier dynasties followed a highly disciplined multi-stage process. Smooth the wall, plaster it, grit it, and deeply carve it to look eternal and orderly. The reliefs carved under Alexander's administration, on the other hand, took a bit more of a we have a tight deadline approach. They carved directly into the stone without the intense Egyptian smoothing ritual, leaving shallower lines, visible outlines, and a rougher, chisel-textured surface.
Two different eras, two different project managers on opposite walls. Enjoy the contrast.
The next room over, heading back north toward the room east of the offering room, is the birth room. One of the most captivating chambers is the birth room, where a series of reliefs detail the divine conception and birth of Amenhotep III. In one scene, the goddess Selkis nurses the infant king. In another, Hathor presents the baby to Amun-Ra like a cosmic baby shower. These scenes weren't just sweet mythology, they were royal propaganda, proving that Amenhotep didn't just have royal blood, he had God mode activated at birth. Throughout the temple, we admire the statues of Ramses II. Their enduring presence reminds visitors that Luxor Temple wasn't built just as a religious center, but as a monument to legacy and power that refused to fade. From Hatshepsut's bark shrines to Alexander's rebranded chapel, from Constantine's quiet altar to the daily calls to prayer echoing from Abu el-Haggag's mosque, Luxor Temple is more than a monument. It's a living chronicle, a place where divine kinship, myth, politics, and millennia of faith have all left their mark, layer by layer, stone by stone, God by God.
Being from Las Vegas, we're no strangers to themed architecture. But walking through the real Karnak and Luxor makes our casino versions look like a very earnest middle school art project. After this trip, my wife is more convinced than ever that Caesar's Palace demands a fact-finding mission to Italy.
Facts. This concludes the sites that we visited in Egypt. For our next adventure, we would take a brief flight back to Cairo, where we would then take another flight to Athens. Thank you for joining us on this journey, and stay tuned for our next episode exploring the historic and wonderful country of Greece.
And remember, don't just watch adventures, create them!
Good morning from ancient Olympia.
Today we got to the park about 8 o'clock, right when it opened, and we're pretty much enjoying it to ourselves. Right in front of us is the Temple of Hera, the wife of Zeus, and across the way are the remains of the Temple of Zeus. Let's try and walk around to get a better view of it. front of us is a structure that was dedicated by Philip of Macedonia. Not only as a tribute to Olympia, but also as a monument. You can see ruins from columns from various structures. And right now, all that remains standing is one lone column. Kind of see it behind the branches. There it is.